Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Technical Training Thursday. I apologize, this is happening at the same time as the Tribal Advisory Committee meeting, but obviously we are recording it so people can go back and watch the recording. As a reminder, all of our Technical Training Thursdays are, I upload them to YouTube, and then that YouTube link is placed on our SharePoint site. We also do have a playlist established on YouTube that has all of the Technical Training Thursdays. You can just watch them in order if you want, like sort of like Netflix streaming. I mean, it's just as exciting. So if you want to do that, let me know, and I can always shoot you just the link to the playlist as well. But today's topic is our tech guide updates. So everything that we updated in April, and I think a few of you are going to touch on some things that we actually updated in October that didn't get released till December because Field Office Tech Guide was being changed to a new platform, but we now have some things up on section 4 for those as well. But with that, if you got any questions, I do ask that you ask your questions. We'll take a break after each presenter, and you can ask your questions because I know like Emily has to jump off for the Tribal Advisory Committee meeting. So with that, I will turn it over to Emily.
Cool. Good morning, world. So today I'm going to talk about range things, and this is the most important topic. That's why it's first. Just kidding. So we're talking about range related updates to the tech guide, and so this works. Yeah. So we only updated 2 tech this time around, and they're small updates. Nothing major. So I'll go into those, and then we also updated some documents in section 4 of the tech guide, and yeah, we'll get into those. So first one is fence. My favorite topic in the whole world is fence, just so you know. We only updated this one section on braces. I reformatted it, so hopefully it's a little bit easier to understand instead of like a bunch of different pieces that are separated by semicolons, or I think it was commas or semicolons. So for the vertical part of the brace, the up and down part of a brace, an H brace, a typical H brace, we have these materials didn't change, it's just reformatted. Oops. And then for the horizontal, so that part that goes across on a brace, we can have lots of different types of materials. We recommend, all of these things will work. We've gone through the process of making sure that they work, but the newest one that we added, I should have highlighted this one, but this 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch by 7 feet squared steel tubing. This is a product that they use, came out of Watertown, that's being used across the state. If you drive around along the interstate, it's like on all the H braces, all new H braces on the interstate. But otherwise, we did add this sentence in the last update in November. Prefabricated fence brace materials designed specifically for horizontal or diagonal fence braces may also be used. And then we added products that meet adjacent state specifications may also be used. When using, attach the state specifications and make appropriate notes. So then we're covered if we, like North Dakota decides to do something, we're like, yeah, just use that. For the most part, we're less stringent than most of the other states, so I don't know if we'll use this one that much, but it's there if we need it. We just want to make it a little easier for folks to certify a fence, because the biggest thing is, the fence going to keep the animals in and facilitate prescribed grazing? If so, we should pay for it. That's my spiel for now, so don't make it too hard. Here's some examples of different fences that we can approve in South Dakota. So this octagon is actually overbuilt. It is stronger than the base material, like a basic uh, wood post type situation. These Kiwi style braces or diagonal braces are appropriate. We did update last November, like this brace, the diagonal brace can be a smaller thickness. Make sure you go read the tech note to figure out what thickness that is, but it doesn't have to be, I think, 2 3/8. Somebody can jump in if I'm speaking out of turn, but it can be small, a little bit smaller, because that tends to happen. We've been cost sharing or providing financial assistance for typical H braces with either a solid steel rod or 2 3/8 inch steel rod in the center. I think the biggest thing is we can't go smaller than 7 foot on that horizontal piece. Like, gotta be 7 foot, people. Not that hard. A lot of stuff are coming 8 foot. 8 foot used to be the standard. And we really, if you measure from the outside of the fence to the outside of the fence, that's what it says in the fences manual from the BLM from like the 1980s. So that's what we're going with. That's also in the tech note. And then this one, this bottom right photo that's that tube, the 1.5 by 1.5 tube. It like slides together and then there's a bolt through it. So they're kind of cool. They use, like I said, the DOT approved them, and they also used them on a bunch of buffalo fence down in the Badlands National Park. So they can keep buffalo in, should keep our cows in. So next, we did a small update to the prescribed grazing tech note. And it was mostly to correspond with an update we made to our annual forages documentation requirements, which I'll get to next. But just to add in a section in the example drought contingency plan about using annual forages. So if we are going to be using annual forages, we should make sure to consider like the drought contingency part of that. And so making sure to say that they're appropriate, but also to use caution when using those forages during a drought period, because they could be high in nitrates or something like that. So make sure we test them. And then also to remind folks, like when you introduce animals to new forages, do it slowly, because if they eat too fast, they can get sick and possibly die. So we added that to the first page, and then again, to test annual forages prior to turnout. And that got placed, that's at the end of the Tech Note 9. And I don't know why it's called Appendix B, because I don't think there's an Appendix A. I will fix that on the next update. Sorry, I missed that. And then I need to get this updated in the grazing tool, and I think the drought tool might have a copy of this too. So I still need to do some updates. I've been shirking on my duties, I guess. So and then we added some documents to section 4 in different folders. So in the 528 pop quiz, what's 528? Anybody? What does that mean? Please tell me you know. Put it in the chat, somebody.
Prescribed grazing.
Yay! Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, Casey. Okay, then 338. What's 338? It's another P one.
Prescribed burning.
And then A10 is our annual forages for grazing systems. 528, thanks, James. So we made those updates. So in the 528 folder, we added this kind of a helpful guide for new employees to go through that goes over like what's needed for planning prescribed grazing. It just kind of breaks it down, breaks all of those documentation requirements down a little bit more, and then provides a checklist for what kind of things you need to do for range inventory. And this is just a guide. It's just a guide. So it's not a you shall, it's a if you need something to help you through the process, here's your guide. So check that out if you're new or less new employee. You can, if you have ideas or thing you're like, we should change this part, let me know. You know, things are fluid, always changing. And then our update to the annual forages for grazing systems, 810 documentation requirements. We just added under planning requirements that when the forage is planned to be grazed, include all planning requirements as needed for prescribed grazing. So this would include your animal and forage balance, which I have up here too, monitoring plan, so we're monitoring those stubble heights, which is part of the um, actual standard. We should have a certain stubble height, and then a contingency plan. So at minimum, include the example drought plan found in the South Dakota Grazing Tool or South Dakota Range Technical Note number 9. So print that Appendix B out and give it to the producer so they can consider a drought contingency plan. Cool. Anybody have questions on that? I'm going fast. Sorry. I just figure we have a lot to cover. So, oh, and this one, sorry. This one is also, I hid it in the ecological sciences tools part of section 4 because interim standards are broken right now and we can't put stuff in those folders in the new software. So it's like everything else. Everything kind of works, but not. So that's where it's at if you want to go look at it. And then finally, I uploaded a new document to the prescribed burning practice folder. So there's quite a few documents in the 338 folder that pertain to job approval. So make sure you go check those out. I'm trying to explain the process. Like we've gone for so long without being able to do much for prescribed burning. So I know it's a process, but so I developed these flow charts. Hopefully Ryan Forbes is so proud. That will help you through the process of getting your different job classes for prescribed burning. Just to kind of go over these a little bit. So to obtain job approval authority for a level 1, so that's just to recommend a prescribed burn to a producer, put it in the plan, and yeah, to put it in the plan. You need to have some sort of awareness training about prescribed burning. And per policy, we follow national policy in South Dakota. We need to make sure that the awareness trainings that we're attending for prescribed burning include the 5 topics listed in national policy. So covering fire behavior, fire ecology, fire effects on resources, safety, and smoke management. So like the national NRCS prescribed burn trainings, which aren't happening this summer, sorry, but they're great. If you ever have a chance to go to one, go to one. That covers all these topics. So that's a great one to go to. The South Dakota Grassland Coalition, SDC Extension, landowner prescribed burn trainings that occur in the spring, like we just had one on Tuesday. Those also cover all those topics. But this one, if you attend this, you also have to take the S190 because we want to get you to that 16 hours of awareness training that it says in national policy. If you go to a different training, like just the firefighting trainings from the National Wildfire Coordinating Group, those don't cover all these topics. So we have to have something else to get you to that, not only 16 hours, but just make sure that you have experience in all of those topics. So that's, just so you know. And then the second part is to have completed prescribed fire field experience. So that's part of national policy also. And I put that on the chart. So this could be completed during one of the above trainings. So usually when you do the NRCS one, the national trainings, they have some burns that you go to, or typically we've been able to do some burns through the extension, Grassland Coalition extension events. Like I don't think on Tuesday you guys got to burn, but or there may be other opportunities that come out in the future where you can attend a burn. But we need to make sure when we go to burns that we're going to a burn where there's somebody who has the appropriate job approval authority for that burn. So you're kind of like in the supervision of that person with job approval authority. So like the Mid-Missouri, they are a partner of ours. If you go to their burn and they're okay with you being there, that's appropriate. Or like Cody Grueling is a partner through the Audubon that has the appropriate like burn experience. So he's another one that we can, if he's there and is okay with us being there, that's great. Volunteer fire departments, if they are okay with you being there, you know, they have the experience, and like something goes wrong, they're already there, you know. So just make sure that you feel comfortable being there and you have the approval of your supervisor prior to going to any of these burns, of course, always. And then South Dakota has a requirement of submitting a completed burn plan to the state RMS prior to obtaining that level 1. And I created a scenario so if somebody doesn't have like burn plans to work on, then I can send you that and you can work through that. Otherwise, that needs to be completed prior to getting a level 1. And then, of course, submit all of this if you went to a training. I don't know who's all going to the national trainings. And sometimes Pete doesn't send me the list for the like extension ones. So let me know if you're there just to double check so that I can keep all of that kind of tracked. And then once you have all that done, then you're a job class 1. So you can put prescribed burning in a conservation plan or contract and talk about prescribed burning. And then after you get a level 1, then you can start working on writing burn plans and moving up the chain. So then you just move through that process. So you have to develop at least 3 prescribed burn plans of that level of complexity and participate in at least 3 prescribed burns of that complexity or higher. And those, of course, you need to have approval to go to. And then just document activities that you did or trainings that you went to through the South Dakota ECS 21, which is a form that's in the prescribed burning folder in the field office tech guide as well. So of course, all of this is following policy. So like trying to follow policy so you don't get in trouble by the national folks if they ever come in like QARS or something. So, and it's just a good practice to make sure that we have the appropriate training, especially for fire. It's such a, like things can go wrong and not in a good way. So we want to make sure that we are properly trained and we're telling producers the right things about prescribed burning, so like they are not getting themselves in trouble, we're not getting them in trouble, you know, just good things to think about. So and then I wanted to end with a joke. So what do you call a jacket that goes up in flames? I think some of you have heard this one. A blazer. Yeah, that's all I got.
Oh, Emily, you and your dad jokes. Did you see that you did have one question in the chat? Did you touch on that? Were those pipe braces you showed required to be capped?
Yes, on anything that has an open top. Like we don't want stuff going in there.
Okay, anything that has an open top has to be capped.
Yep.
Okay, are there any other
with that?
Okay,
and
good.
those octagon ones, they should come with pipe fitted tops. Like the guy who sells them, he's got all the tops and they get screwed on. So
okay,
cool. Thanks.
Any other questions for Emily before she has to jump off for the other meeting? Okay, thanks, Emily. Appreciate it. If you do have questions you think of, you can type them in the chat and she can monitor that as well and answer it at a later time. All right, thanks, Emily. With that, we are going to turn to Marcia for we're going to turn to Marcia for agronomy updates.
Okay, well, unlike Emily, I failed miserably. and started my presentation, and then I didn't get very far. So I was still getting changes requested yesterday. So let's start. I'm going to shut this camera off so you guys don't see me looking back and forth between two screens, and that way you can visualize me much younger with less gray hair. Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Okay.
Right now we are just seeing your desktop though. I'm just seeing a link.
Yep. Okay. So let's start. Let's see. I started with some pretty sunflowers because I thought that would be nice. And let's see. I probably will go there. I'll just go this. We'll get as far as I can with my presentation, and then we'll switch. Okay. So the first thing, let's just start with section 1. We updated the Agronomy Tech Note 16. And this update happened last week. I'm still being told that everybody, that people are struggling to understand what they need in order to be able to certify the cover crop practice. And so what I did here is I just tried to make the wording very simple and very clear, okay? And so, we need our seed tags, our receipts, loadout slips, whatever they have in order to determine if the seeding meets the implementation requirements, okay? We talk about seed test earlier in the tech note, but I just put a reminder here that, if that seed, that seed test requires to be within that 9-month time period. And if that time period is lapsed, we're going to need to retest that seed, right? And I'll give you an example. Like every year I grow cover crops for Intro to Agronomy. I got the seed all at the same time, right? It's the same seed. I carry it over. It's in my house. It's, cool in the summer, warm in the winter. Last year I planted, everything. My cereal rye did not grow, right? Everything else that I bought at the same time grew, right? So you just never know what the viability of that seed is when you carry it over. It might be fine, it might not be fine. And once you planted it, that's a lot of time and money to waste before you decide whether or not your seed is any good. So, make sure you have a current seed test. And then the reason that we have alternative methods for determining if that practice can be certified is, in the old days, right? People, if people didn't meet the implementation requirements, we couldn't pay for the practice, and people are like, this makes us look really bad because, they didn't do it correctly. They didn't follow the seed plan, but the stand is functioning the way we intended. And so those alternatives are not in to replace, going out and looking at the site and getting your seed tag. It's a method to determine that the stand is functioning when something went wrong. It's not in lieu of, it's, okay, this happened, and now is this, can we still certify it? Is it still doing what it needs to do? That's what that's intended for, okay? All right. The other thing that we added to the Agronomy Tech Note is a small scale prepared seed mix. And this one, I consulted a lot of people, the Soil Health Coalition, Kent, our agronomists, and this was the only mix that I could get everyone to agree on. Once we started deviating from this, people, kind of disagreed about different species and things. And so we settled on this one as a starting point. So this is the one we have in it. It doesn't mean that this is the only one you can use. It just means this is a starting point that everyone agreed on. It was inexpensive. It was easy to kill. It's a good beginner mix for our small scale producers. Other changes, I had a request to add the photos that we use in the CSP enhancements to kind of give people a visual of, when you're aerial seeding into a standing crop, what that should look like. So that I put those photos in. And then, that statement that we've added to the job sheet that says the seeding window for high tunnels may be extended beyond 15 days. I included that, and so you're going to have to use your best professional judgment to determine, what that time period is. And, consider things like whether the high tunnel is heated or irrigated, right? Those are all going to be impact whether or not that seed is going to survive. And then we updated the cover crop table 1 to match the 340, the South Dakota JS 340. Okay. In the standard, so the cover crop standard changed, and in the standard, it requires us to have a contingency plan, right? So that we can provide the producer with options. And the other thing that we did is I added no fall tillage to the additional criteria for 3 resource concern purposes. I added it for erosion, I added it for increased organic matter, and I added it for improved habitat for soil organisms. Okay. Yesterday, I was asked how come I didn't put it in the general criteria for everything. And the reason is some of our purposes require, utilize cover crops as a nitrogen source, right? So I know a lot of times we're used to just working with producers, that are, primarily corn, soybean, maybe some small grains, and we don't consider that we have organic producers who do things, really differently. And we have, these small scale producers that we're still trying to figure out how to help them and how to manage things. And so when I put additional restrictions, when I make something more restrictive, right, then that means that you have to meet that in order to certify the practice. And there's going to be situations where, maybe we need to do some tillage for some purposes, in a specific situation. So just because I didn't put that on every purpose doesn't mean that, that's not me saying, oh yeah, fall tillage is fine here. No, that's me saying, consider that producer's operation and how you need that cover crop to function, and what, like situational, help the producer identify the best option for that situation. A lot of these say, these additional criteria say, let it grow as long as possible, leave the soil covered, right? So this was my compromise. I didn't put it in the general criteria because then it's applicable to everything. Okay. So if you have questions and you're not sure about that, let me know. If you think there are other purposes that should be on that I didn't include, that's something we can consider, in October. That comment period that we give you, like, that's your opportunity to bring things up and ask questions and make suggestions. Once things are published, it becomes very hard then to add, to make your changes. Like I said, I'm getting asked to make changes yesterday. Well, everything is published and it's been released. So that comment period is really important, that you take time and look at what we have and then offer suggestions. Okay. Okay. So there we go. That's as far as I got. So we'll just. Okay. So that's as far as I got with my presentation there. And I'm going to try not to close out of the whole, because I've done that before. I'm going to Stop sharing. Close that. I have accidentally closed myself out of the presentation before, and I don't want to do that. Okay, so that's the tech note and the standard for cover crop. All right, let's look at the job sheet. So I'm going to pull up the job sheet. All right, so you see our cover crop job sheet?
We're not seeing it yet, Marcia.
No, because I have to share it again. There we go.
There we go. Now we got it.
Okay. All right. So here's the cover crop job sheet. And so, so fun fact, some of you have told me, you know, the date, you know, if you did print preview, Mark has a date up here in this right-hand corner above this print button. Mark only changes that date when he physically changes how this, you know, how a form looks, right? So what you're looking for is what version number we're on. So always, whenever Mark makes a change, he changes the version number. The form ID doesn't always, you know, that doesn't change unless he, you know, he changes something about the form itself. Okay, so we're on version 2.9, 2.91. And the difference between 2.9 that I released and 2.91 is we fixed this link to the cover crop tech note so that it goes to the most recent version. That's the only change. Okay. So we're going to choose our practice. We're going to choose our practice purpose. If our purpose is one of those purposes that require an erosion prediction tool, it will, the little check if South Dakota efficiency was used box will come up. Otherwise, you know, if I don't have a purpose that requires an erosion prediction tool, it will just be a little box with a caret, and we can't figure out how to get that to go away. So, you know, so that's what that is, in case you wondered about that. Okay. So now once we've chose our purpose, you know, we can choose, you know, a prepared mix, or we can make our own. And if we come down here and choose our prepared mix, and so I've got a small scale that winter kills. Let's do that one. So I got our oats, peas, and vetch, and I see we must have changed our mind and put in a small scale that overwinters. I bet it's just cereal rye. Okay, we evidently started and then didn't finish that, so that's something we can fix. Okay, so we have our mix in here. So did you see something different happen? So once I put the mix in, my planned seeding window automatically populated now. Okay, so if I change that mix, like, so let's say I wanted to add rye. Early, okay, still early spring. So even though I've added cereal rye, which overwinters, it's going to still use the most restrictive time period. So when you plan your mix, this is now going to populate for you. Okay, and you say, well, okay, Marcia, you know, I can give them 10 days, right? And so, you know, maybe I can give them, you know, I want to say August 25th, right? I can type that in here, you know, or, you know, I could write, you know, seed by August 25th. So any, you know, when it's yellow, you can populate it. Sometimes people said, you know, I want that something to stand out. Any of these yellow boxes, you can highlight them. Okay, so you can make that stand out and say what you want. You know, so that's a change. the wording for the producer risk, for herbicide carryover, that's just a slightly different wording. Oh, on the termination method. Okay, so I told you that I only put no fall tillage on a few purposes, but what I did do to help you is if the termination method that they're looking to use is frost, right? So if we're using frost as our termination method, I mean, that's implying that we are not going to till it because frost is our termination method. And so if you have those producers that need to do some tillage, right? For instance, those organic producers, right? You can choose that as an option. But, when you say frost is your termination method, it will show up as no fall tillage. So I did that there for you, okay? Let's see. Okay, so I think that's everything that has changed on this page. I think everything else is still exactly the same. If we go to our table 1, the one thing I changed here is, okay, when we had under winter survival, it's a little bigger, under winter survival, go over. We had S's in there for sporadic, okay? Well, people took that to mean, oh, that could be part of an overwintering mix. And that was not what we intended. Sporadic meant it was a cautionary statement that cover crop could potentially overwinter in the right conditions and therefore may require additional management, right, before planting. And so we've changed that and given it, an N6, right? So the computer is kind of locking up here. Why are you locking up? And so if you come down here, right, your footnotes, not intended as an overwintering cover crop. Under the right conditions, it could overwinter and may require some additional control. Under here on number 5, we had a request to remove cereal rye from our seeding mix, and that's a no. But what we did is we did list cereal rye with buckwheat, as a contaminant. It has a potential to be a contaminant. The other thing that we did is because we had that request to remove cereal rye, we said, okay, let's make winter wheat and winter triticale comparable to rye so that there are options for people in lieu of cereal rye. And so triticale and winter wheat now have the same seeding rate as cereal rye. Okay, so that was a change. The other thing that we had a request for was an urban table 1. And so we did do that. Now and the request was we didn't want to have all of the purposes because some of them they didn't feel were, applicable to an urban situation. And so if you look up here, we go CF. They're not gone, they're just hidden. And you can unhide them if you want to unhide them, or you can hide whichever ones you want. So this is your table 1 to sort and hide whatever you want. It doesn't impact the tool at all. But if you just want to show somebody something specific and you don't want them to see everything else, this is the table 1 that you can use to do that, okay? The other request that we had was to have a seed per square foot. So all we did was we used our seeding rate in our table 1 and converted it to seeds per square foot. So it's still just an average, for the large scale producers, it's just an average. Okay, so that is everything. Oh, I almost forgot. I told you that we added a contingency plan. Okay. So back here in table 1, when I chose what my cover crop was, right? Based on that, what I chose, it populated a contingency plan for me. Okay. And what we did is we just picked from the existing recommended mixes that we had, which ones were going to be kind of the best. So some might have 1, some might have 2, and the name may not necessarily match, just because, you know, in the background Mark assigned them a number. And so I've got my mix. We have options, right? So if somebody, you know, can't plant, you know, they can't get that mix, or they want to make a change, they can't get a hold of you, you know, it kind of helps guide them to, you know, a better, you know, helps guide them in their decision making process. Okay. And so you could give them, you know, seeding option 1, you know, planted at this date, seeding option 2, if you can't plant by this date, or you could give them this contingency plan. And then, you know, people said, well, okay, Marcia, I don't want my person to use flax, right? Cross it out, you know, circle the things that are good options for them. You can mark this contingency plan up all you want and help lead them in the right direction. The one thing it does for the vendor is, if they take their contingency plan with them, is it gives them our full seeding rates for everything. So that if they are making substitutions, right, and we show you that, you know, if you want 15% of your mix to be, you know, it was oats and now it's going to be barley, well, they don't have the same, you know, they don't have the same seeding rate. And so it shows them how to make those adjustments. So that's what the contingency plan is for, is to help get people in the right direction, you know, when you're not available to ask. But, you know, still on your vendor sheet, you know, put your phone number, you know, put to contact you, you know, before they make a change. But we all know that sometimes people make a change without calling first. And so it's just trying to help them to get to the right answer when they don't talk to you first. Okay. All right. So I think that is everything that I have on cover crop. So are there any questions on cover crop?
There are no questions in the chat right now, Marcia.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to show you, oops. I'm going to show you 590, and that one takes a minute here to load. Let him sit here for a minute while he does that. Okay. So it always takes a minute. Maybe while he's opening, I will, if I show, can you see the tech, oops, can you see the tech guide?
Yep, we sure
Okay.
can.
Okay, why the 590 is opening, I'll show you some things in here. Okay, so 823 organic management, that IR, right? That IR got moved to the ecological sciences tools. Because, like Emily said, we can't make updates to the interim standard folders. So 823, I was able to delete it out, the old one out of there. The new one is down under ecological science form. Soil carbon amendment is new. So we have a CPS. I didn't make any changes from the national. We have an IR document. I combined 2 states documents, and if anyone, you know, I would take feedback on this, because I'm thinking about already changing it. And I'll show you here in a second why I'm thinking about changing it. And then, like I said, if we get up here, this is here to close and go down to the ecological science tools, right? So here's that organic management job sheet. And the biggest thing that I changed is trying to separate all the general criteria stuff from the additional criteria that you need, and then giving you a place to identify if you're paying for 823, like what are you doing? Like, what's happening, so that when we certify the practice, we can tell that like what you were intending the producer to do. Okay. So that's that one. Let's see. Yep. All right, 590 is open now. All right, so what we did on 590 is, sorry to jump around, you guys, but you asked for more blend formulation. Okay, so what we're going to do, right? So we have, so here, step one, create blend one, right? You can do liquid or dry. And then you come down to your first box, right? And you're going to choose your formula. So let's say we're going to do 4600. When we choose that blend formulation, if it's named, it will show up over here. If it's not named, nothing will show up in the white box. Okay. So then, we're going to put, let's say 80% urea, and then we're going to use some AMF. So I'm looking for 21. You just have to scroll down here. I find my ammonium sulfate, and now, I'm going to put my 20% here. Okay, so this needs to add up to 100%. If, for instance, I picked something that didn't have, an ID, right? Nothing shows up in the white. Okay, so now this is what's different than what you're used to. So we have 6 options here, but in order for it to show up, you have to hit this return button. You're going to click that. If you don't click the return button, your product won't show up, in the spreadsheet. Okay, so make sure you hit that return button. And like I said, previously we had 2 blend options, and now we have 6. So that should accommodate everything everyone else, that everyone needs to do. That should be plenty, I think. So that's the only change we did to this job sheet. Okay, so that's that one. Okay, now I'm going to here, and I'm going to show you some, I'm going to go back to soil carbon amendment here. Okay, soil carbon amendment. There was funding through NRCS to develop a soil carbon amendment calculator. And, this might be something that we should consider using, because it goes through and it helps you determine whether or not what you're doing, either for compost or for biochar, is going to have a benefit. And so it looks a little complicated, but essentially it's just moving values off of your amendment report that you get and your soil test, and entering those numbers. And so there are videos to watch on how to use this. And what I did, or what Victor did for me, is on our SharePoint site. So on the South Dakota SharePoint site, under Ecological Sciences Agronomy, Victor created a Soil Carbon Amendment Resources tab. So all of those ARS documents, videos, all of that stuff is there. We have links to everything, and we have links to the spreadsheet. So that's something, you know, if you you know, end up with somebody interested in biochar or compost, you know, this is a good resource. And if you need help, reach out to me, and I'll help you, because, you know, we're still kind of learning about this. So some other states, you know, have adopted this standard before us. And so they've kind of been, you know, kind of sharing some of the issues that they've run into. Some, you know, they thought that it would be small scale producers wanting to do biochar, and it has, you know, it's been primarily large scale producers wanting to do biochar. And so some states have set limits. The other thing that another state showed me is web soil survey. So in web soil survey, if you, and I can make this a little bigger. So if you go to web soil survey and you go under Soil Data Explorer, suitabilities and limitations for use, and you choose biochar, you know, dynamic soil properties biochar is what I think it says, and you draw out your area of interest, it will tell you what the rating for your soil is to respond to biochar. And so, you know, red will be unsuited, low, you know, so see it, so this is the field north of my house, right? I have an area that is a low response, and I have an area that is a fair response, you know, and I have nothing that is good or excellent, right? So biochar probably is not going to be a good option, you know, for my field, you know. So that's something, you know, if you're questioning whether or not, you know, biochar is going to be beneficial, go check out this web soil survey link and take a look and see what the field potential to respond to biochar is. Some states have said, you know, if you're not in the at least fair, or you know, that, you know, they're not going to do it. So that's just something to think about. Okay, so there's that. All right. SharePoint site, our job sheet is, you know, it's pretty easy. It's just a matter of, and the reason I'm thinking about changing it already is what you're doing is you're moving a lot of data, you know, a lot of numbers from, you know, the amendment analysis, you know, to the job sheet. And I think there might be an easier way, you know, that we can do that, or a way that gives us better information. And that's why I'm kind of liking that spreadsheet that was developed by ARS. The trouble is it's linked to, there's two links to it, and one is a public version and one is, you know, for us, a SharePoint site. And so I haven't quite figured out how to, you know, put that into like the field office tech guide so that people can access it, you know, that are outside of us. So, you know, so, and if I just put a copy of it, then we won't have the updates, you know, so if they update it, we won't, you know, we'll just have whatever copy we have in there. So I would welcome feedback on biochar and what the best way to do some of these things are. Okay. The only other thing for me is I had conservation cover, So that was updated nationally this year. And we updated the CPA 4. So CPA 4, we're on version 3.6. The only change I made to that was to make the practice purposes for 327 match what is in the new standard. And then the only other thing that Mark did with the CPA 4 is he fixed some macros so that it would open faster. And then there's no practice selected when it opens up, because there was trouble if something you wanted was already there, you had to click out of it and click back in to get it to show up. And so he's fixed that. So that should be, oh, one last thing. I got one more thing. I got a long list, sorry. Okay, so conservation crop rotation, residue management no-till, and residue management reduced till, right? Many of you did not enjoy running Russell 2 and Webb's, and when erosion wasn't the purpose, we created a job sheet that was, easier. And because I named it like other states, they named it, based on the crop rotation. And some of you said, that is really confusing to have it by crop rotation when you can use it for residue management. And so we changed the name of it and made it a tool, right? So it's going to be in the Field Office Tech Guide, and we called it a cropping system IR. So let's see if I still have ecological science tools. And we come down here, you see this cropping system IR. So we tell you that this implementation requirement can be used for codes 328, 329, and 345 when erosion or something that you need an erosion prediction tool is not required. Okay. So lots of changes this time, but that should do it for me.
All right, any questions for Marcia? All right, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. So again, if you think of something, you can throw it in the chat and we'll answer it as time allows. But if not, we're going to move on to Laura and forestry updates.
Hello. So generally in October, I try and release all my updates that pertain to agroforestry. And then in April, I try and release all my updates that pertain to the more traditional forestry. So if you are not in an area that does a lot of traditional forestry, this might be kind of boring for you. Hopefully my fun slideshow makes it so much better. Okay. So in April, oh my goodness, we updated one tech note, our kind of main Black Hills Forest Management tech note 43. We did change its name to the Ecology and Management of Western South Dakota Ponderosa Pine. Went through and added an ecology section, how to do treatments for more ecological restoration, and kind of a glossary so everyone knew what we were talking about when we used terms such as basal area. Let's kind of go through that real fast if my thing works. Okay, so this tech note's kind of similar to what it was before. It's got a table of contents that you can click on. It does start out with more of the ecology of pine, the tree characteristics, disturbances, just basic forest dynamics, the changes in the ecology over the years, what that's left us with, how to kind of restore that function that we may be missing due to fire suppression. And then just other treatments that we normally would do. Keep going. A lot of this is very similar to what it was before. It is just reorganized a little bit to make a little more sense. This was one of my first tech notes that I updated. So it's very Forest Service heavy. And now that I don't have more of an NRCS mindset, I was able to do it better. It's still, keep going. Okay, then definitions. So we have our definitions. I still offer pictures of like what these treatments are. So if you're working with the landowner or yourself and you're like, what does this even look like? You should be able to kind of get an idea from the pictures at the back of the document. Oh, I'm going to keep going through this. We offer some of our regular charts and graphs, site index, density diagrams. This will become important towards the end of my updates. And then also a list of references in case you guys are so intrigued by this tech note that you want to read more. That is an option. So that was my only update for section 1. Section 4, the only conservation practice standard that was updated was woody residue treatment. The conservation practice standard mostly kept with the national. National changed it to kind of open it up to more land uses and applicable to other things. Tried to just kind of improve the clarity, provide relevant metrics to South Dakota, update our references. Woody residue treatment was one of our conservation practices that had been missing an implementation requirement. So I went ahead and made one of those. And also just your regular documentation requirements. So all of that is here on the ePhotog. So your conservation practice standard, your residue treatment implementation requirement is down here. Maybe. Yeah. It's a fillable PDF. This does have the ability to import all this information from a completed forest management plan. So if you're doing woody residue treatment on forest land in conjunction with anything on forest management plan, you should have a forest management, anything on forest land, you should have a forest management plan. So a lot of this information can be just preloaded into that. And I'll show you how that works when I go over the changes to our forest management plan template. Your other, just the documentation requirements, required forms, South Dakota Forest Management Plan, the IR, and this is kind of the usual stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna get out of that. Just to kind of go over, because woody residue treatment has changed, there's like a couple of options for it that maybe takes it out of actual traditional forestry. It's designed to manage your woody debris on your forest floor. You know, the idea, it can be like, so if we went through and cut all the trees down, say through Ponderosa Pine and the Black Hills, or even Eastern Red Cedar, this is a practice that can be used to deal with that slash that's left over. Instead of just leaving it there, you can pile it, you can masticate it, run it over with a masticator. You can also, like we have payment scenarios that deal with catastrophic damages for events like tornadoes. We've had probably a dozen tornadoes in the Black Hills since I've been working in forestry. And then we had the derecho on the eastern side of the state. So this can be used to clean up that forest and land tornado, or even that like derecho events in the windbreaks. It can also be used to deal with insect outbreaks, such as the mountain pine beetle. There's a lot of down woody material from that outbreak that was in the 2010s to 2015. Or this emerald ash borer. So one of the limitations is that this is like for management of woody material, like we do have in the conservation practice standard that we want to leave some of it behind for future soil health and habitat. So we're not really looking to just remove it all with this practice. It's more of a management practice. It does require a forest management plan if it's on a forested land use. Technically, it should require one on windbreaks and rangelands too, but I'm sure like we can get variances for that because it doesn't make a lot of sense to have to do a forest management plan when you're gonna cut all the trees down and have a grassland. You're not really managing the forest at that point. And it's like a follow-up practice to the cutting of trees down. So it's not designed to really sever the trees from the stumps like forest stand improvement or brush management. It's meant to deal with the after effects of cutting those trees down. We do have a tech note that I'm gonna show you guys. Maybe if I can figure out how to, that'll talk about, it's not a new one. It was one that was created last April. That will kind of explain some of the ways to deal with this forest slash. When I say masticator or piling, chipping, kind of explains what that stuff means and when to use each of those. So that's here, Tech Note 45, production and management of forest slash, kind of talks about what it is. How to treat it, what kind of treatment options that we have, lop and scatter, piling with a big machine, burning piles. We do have pile burning in burning standard, mastication, chipping, just hauling it away. Some conditions, things to consider when dealing with slash, such as the pine engraver beetle and the northern long-eared bat. Kind of a handy table here that helps you figure out what is the best way to deal with that slash based on your slope and your equipment and your site disturbance. And then again, pictures if you want to know like what will lop and scatter look like. What does piling look like? Trying to find a masticator for you guys. Yeah, there's mastication. There's a masticator. So that was an older tech note, but if you're looking into woody residue treatment, that might help. Next, I updated the implementation requirement for forest stand improvement. Really, this was only updated so that it could be filled out from that forest management plan's template. So there was fields added that would come for that forest management plan template. The internet is not my friend today. Okay, we're just gonna forget about that. Okay, so kind of the big things that we updated was the template for the South Dakota Forest Management Plan. I updated it to remove like the information and guidance that was in it to like a button, so it wasn't taking up fillable space. Reorganized it so it made more sense when conducting inventory and writing the plan. And then I created the ability that you can export your forest management plan to be able to be inputted into your IRs for forest stand improvement and woody residue treatment. So maybe this will work. Okay. Might not work because it's on the internet. Okay, so this one's filled out so I can show you. The idea is that you'll hover on these and it's harder when it's filled out, but it'll kind of show you what does it mean to have, what is a resource concern and where do you find it? What maps do we need and why? So when this thing is filled out, you should be able to export it. I might have to open it up in Adobe. 1 minute. Okay, we're gonna do it from here. Okay, so here are those buttons that highlight. The red cells will be those that are required. If you don't have anything in them, in the red cells, then it won't let you move forward. Okay, just gonna stick a fake phone number in there. So, you would hit your update, stick it somewhere important, you know, like most of us want the desktop. And then you can go ahead and you can open your IR. And you can say input your forest management plan. You can go to where you saved it and it should autofill all the needed information. There's a couple things that you will have to fill out. So you do have to read and make sure it's done right. Your operation and maintenance, make sure you have a plan. And then you can go back and then open the IR for your woody residue treatment. Same idea. And it should be able to be filled out. So one thing I forgot to say with this, we did put in an option to add photos here. So you should be able to browse and add a picture. Your forest management plan template. So that's kind of the big updates to that. A lot of the base information is the same. It's just better organized, more space for writing, because Adobe just makes it smaller and smaller instead of being able to expand the boxes. It was getting hard to read. So those are our updates there. Then our inventory tool, that was updated as well. This is the tool that we use if you're going to be collecting forest inventory to write your forest management plan or doing forest inventory to do your checkouts of like forest stand improvement or fuel break. Okay. Okay. This form is similar to how it used to be. You're able to get your field data if you collected it on a phone or a tablet. And then you can just input it if you wrote it on a piece of paper like I always do. Okay. A lot of the stuff is the same. These pages didn't change. What we did add on the summary tab, if you remember way back beginning of my talking, where I was showing you those graphs on our tech note that we updated, instead of having to like use those graphs and find these numbers yourself, you can input the species you're looking at, most likely ponderosa pine, and it'll give you that stocking level. So this stand is at 35% stocking, or what we refer to as full site occupancy. Also, in order to minimize your looking at graphs, what we did is your site index trees, the trees with we age, and take heights to determine how well of a growing site those trees can grow on. It'll put those trees on the graph for you to help you better determine site index, so you don't have to flip to another document to look for that as well. And those are our main changes, just the addition of this form and this line right there. Yeah, kind of went fast, but mostly it's just applies to the western part of the state. So if there's any questions.
All right, there's no questions in the chat. Any questions for Laura before we move on? All right, if not, thank you, Laura. I am going to share my screen and cover the changes on the wildlife side of the house. Brandon was feeling under the weather today, so I'll be quickly going over his changes. Just as a reminder, I know sometimes the technical guide notices you might not always pay attention to as they come out, but please go back and look at them so that you know. Just as a reminder, we try to only make technical guide notice changes in April and October. It doesn't happen all the time. Again, as I stated earlier, we ran into some issues with the software and getting things up on Field Office Tech Guide, and so one happened to not happen till December. But generally, it's October and April because we have a year from when the changes are made on a national level to make our changes. But this is what the technical guide notice looks like. So if you're just looking for a summary and you're like, well, I don't work in the western part of the state, so it doesn't really matter to me yet at this point in time what changes were made on the forestry plans and things, then don't worry about that. But anyway, that's where the summary of changes are. So just a reminder about that. A couple things I want to touch on for Brandon. He made some additions to the 647 Early Successional Habitat Development and Management Practice Standard. These are all just state-specific changes that help with planning and implementation. We did do away with the South Dakota CPA 58 as far as a form. We're using the CPA 19. I'm not going to read these changes to you, but you can see that those highlighted, that highlighted text is the change, or the, excuse me, not a change necessarily, but the addition of South Dakota specific information. So again, you know, just a reminder, critical nest and brood rearing periods in South Dakota are May 1 to August 1. He did just change the documentation requirements for this practice standard as well, again, to remove the CPA 58. So that's what changed for the 647 standard. He did also go ahead and develop a biology tech note related to bat houses. We had some interest in bat houses. This would fall under the 649 practice standard. So again, that information is on the Field Office Tech Guide. And here you can see the tech note will be in the tech note in section 1, but the implementation requirements are here in section 4 under 649. So I'm just going to briefly pull that up. This is what the IR document looks like for those individuals that are interested in bat houses. This does a really good job of going through materials, construction, so on and so forth. And then it has actual diagrams of the house itself. We've got a monitor summary sheet where all of this, the monitoring that's done will come over that information. They did a really good job of setting this up. I think that Chuck helped with this one. So shout out to Chuck for helping with this, but the cell color, if it's orange, you should input data by using the drop down. In the green boxes, you can just enter that data. So the individual can monitor, the bat houses. We do not have something similar for duck nesting boxes, I don't believe. But we do have an IR document for fence markers. If that's something we need is for duck nesting boxes, we can sure work on developing that. I know that we do have a payment scenario for those, so I can sure talk to Brandon about doing that. But those are the main things. Again, if you have interest or have questions, reach out to Brandon or your ARC for Technology and ask those questions. But I just wanted to briefly cover the updates for Brandon. Any other questions? All right. If not, I will stop sharing and I will send it over to Rachel, who will be our final presenter. It does look like we're going to go past 11:30. I apologize for that, but we do have a lot of changes, a lot of updates that we made here in April.
Thank you, Jessica. All right, I will not be too long so we can all get out. So we have some fun and exciting updates for urban related matters. And before we get to the updates, I did want to reiterate a few updates that were made from our November-December release, which is under mulching and pest management, as well as our resource inventory booklet. So I just want to point these out because they weren't on ePhotog at the time due to some issues with uploading. So I wanted to bring your attention to them. So under mulching, we have our 484 mulching urban document. That document is here. I have gone over it, so I'm not going to do it again. If you have questions when filling it out, reach out to me and I'm happy to do it together. The one thing I will mention with this is if you are planning landscape fabric, our treatment areas doesn't allow you to do linear feet. So you can just write that in if you so choose. Don't overthink it. It will be fine. But this does a really great job of looking at the different mulching materials, different types of maintenance and operation requirements, and then a little bit more about pros and cons of the mulching. So very great tool here. I want to make sure everyone knows that, located on ePhotog. We also then have under 595, something similar, again, our urban IR. So that document is also very straightforward. It's going to look very similar to the 595 document that already exists. I think the biggest things that you're going to find that are a little different are going to be kind of on our PAM portion. When we're working with small scale and urban and specialty production, they're going to rely a lot more heavily on our prevention, avoidance, and monitoring rather than on the suppression part. So take some time to fill this out. You can use the other 595 document, the traditional one we use for everyone else. Just make sure you're filling in that IPM plan sheet in the Excel. That's going to be very important. And then, of course, if a producer is using any type of chemicals, then you need to make sure that you're filling out the suppression sheet and making sure we're going through the monitoring efforts as we would with any other producer. You're probably not going to encounter this a ton. A lot of people don't love putting chemicals on specialty production just because there is a lot of risk on multiple factors. But things like vinegar, sometimes you might see some really interesting things from neem oil to vinegar and apple cider and soap. You could even see dichotomous earth, all different types of things. And those are located in the WinPST tool. So utilize that as best as possible. And of course, reach out if you need any assistance there. The other thing I will mention that was from our last update is going to be our booklet. So I've put our booklet on ePhotog so it is easy accessible. We have it under our tech notes. So our tech note for urban and small scale here. And it's entitled the Resource Inventory Workbook for Urban and Small Scale. Let's click at it here. So I really urge you all to fill this out with your producer, whether that is giving this to the producer when they come into the door, when you meet on site. Either they can fill it out themselves on their own, take some time, and then come into the field office, or you sit down with your producer and fill this out together. This is going to be a great starting point, regardless if you're planning EQIP or you're planning CSP. You're going to gather all of the information you need to know about their operation. It's going to be a great point to start up some discussion. And it's also going to help guide you in the planning process with figuring out what are their needs, what are their goals, what does their operation look like, and how can NRCS fit in this? This is also something we can use to prioritize a little bit of our work. If this is something you've given to the producer and they've not returned it yet, then maybe you're going to wait until they bring that in to further discuss planning with you. It breaks down all of our land uses from cropland. There's even a forestry aspect in here. We also have a few controlled environment ag, but it's going to break down all that management. I know irrigation is also a really big thing too. So there's information on irrigation. We can certainly add more information if things are needed, but it's also going to help do the groundwork to make the planning a little bit more smoother. So please, please, please use this. And if you find discrepancies, if you think things could be added, let me know. We can always update it. You also don't need to print out all of this. If there are some pages that just aren't needed, that's fine. You will likely not come across forestry a lot, so maybe don't print out that page. That is very fine. But check that out, kind of go from there. All right, so those are the last updates I wanted to reiterate. Our new updates from our most recent release. So we have a new implementation requirements for urban crop rotation. So it will be found in your section 4. And this is what the sheet looks like. I try to keep all of the urban job sheets in a similar format. Our raised bed and our low tunnels also look very similar to this. So I try to make them resemble a little bit easier. With our crop rotation for urban, we have our purposes laid out here. You have purpose based on resource concern and the purpose based on what it's going to look like in cart. This was something I stole from a different state, so I can't take credit for it, but I really liked that they laid this out. Next thing you're going to do, refer to our practice standard. So some of these resource concerns are going to have additional criteria requirements. So please make sure that those are lining up with what's written in the conservation practice standard. Moving on, we have kind of briefly, this can be a sketch of what the area looks like. It could be a map. Get creative, it's very fine. But some of these operations are going to have some unusual designs. They're not just going to be a block field that we often see in larger scale. So do something to kind of make it better understandable. So then we have our planned page. So very simple, pretty straightforward. We have our beginning crop here. We're going to say cucumbers, time in the field. This is something you could get from the producer when you're working through these job sheets with them. Hey, how long are cucumbers going to be in your field for? 32 days. Now, I'm just realizing all of this autofill, so might have to actually change that. That's a problem. But we also have a succession 2 and a succession 3. So if they are potentially doing something early in spring and then doing another plant following that in the same location, we call that a succession. So that might be something like doing lettuce in as our beginning crop, followed by tomatoes. And if possible, they're doing a third succession in the same season. We have a field for that. We also have a place for botanical family, which I will talk about very briefly in just a little bit. But fill this plan out. This is going to be the plan sheet. And then we have our applied sheet. So it looks very similar, but this is what's going to actually be done. And then we have our, did it meet our standards? Yes and no. I would recommend print this page out for however many fields or beds or areas that you're working with. If you want to get a little creative and just have them on the same sheet for sake of simplicity, that is fine. Okay, so we have bed 1, bed 2, bed 3. Here it is. That's also fine, rather than having one whole sheet for bed 1, one whole sheet for bed 2. So I am okay to be a little flexible here, but now we actually have something where we can record our crop rotation for urban and small scale. And botanical families can very easily be looked up on Google. For instance, what's the botanical family of a zucchini? It is a cucurbit, right? So you can write that in. And then finally, just some operation and maintenance, any additional planning notes, and then we've laid out exactly what our documentation needs to be here. And then make sure too, as I mentioned, additional documentation as it's outlined in the CPS, make sure that is also included. So pretty straightforward. I will need to get this checked out. It didn't do that before, so I find that's a problem, but we'll get that uploaded and fixed here shortly. The other thing that I will have available for staff is very similar. This was created by our North Dakota urban conservationist. She made it after being inspired by my job sheet, and now I'm very inspired by what she did. But it's very similar. You know, you're planning out your planned crop, the plots that it is. She doesn't have a lot of room for succession. She's just kind of looking at simple year 1, year 2. She also has people drawing out kind of what their design looks like, you know, as an example. And then she also has all of these plant families. So if you do want to reference this to find your plant family, that is very fine. The objective here is that we're just using something to take note of what our crop rotations are looking like based on the resource concern that we're addressing with that practice. So this is going to be located in the SharePoint site, which I will show you in just a second. So Urban Ag SharePoint site, if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, we have resources for planners. If we open that up, we have kind of urban program related matters. Those are going to be various documents and resources from NRCS as well as from other USDA agencies. If we scroll down again, we have planning and outreach. And so this is where that North Dakota tool is kept right here. North Dakota small scale crop rotation work. So you're welcome to kind of use either one. We just want something to document. Whatever one you may find a little easier as a planner to navigate, that is very fine. But just again, reference what that standard is going to require for the resource concern. Another update I just want to bring attention to is going to be our raised bed IR. We weren't able to update this on ePhotog because it's an interim status, but I made a very small change. Essentially, what did happen is I had our feet in height here a little goofy. I had the example in inches, but the unit is in feet. So I changed that. And then I also got the recommendation to change this table a little bit. So it was just a little bit more user friendly. So I did that as well. Otherwise, nothing else changed. You can still use the other one if you want. It's very fine, but just know that it was a little bit updated. Yep. So those things. All right. The other two things I'm very excited for.
Hey, Rachel,
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
before you move on, were you able to put that IR document in section 1 like Marcia did, or do we need to do that yet?
Oh, you know.
We for the
yeah,
we'll put it in section 1.
Okay.
For the interim standards, we'll just get it in section 1 for now, and then once section 4 is fixed for interim standards, we'll put it in there. So we'll make sure to get it on Field Office Tech Guide.
And Jeff, I put it actually in section 4 under tools.
Okay, that works too.
Yeah.
Yes,
so
I'm sorry. You said that.
Tools.
Yeah,
and
you
so,
said that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, just it's
That makes
in
sense.
section 4 until they fix that for us. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. All right. So the other thing is we have 2 new tech notes for Urban. So I'm trying to get some good tech notes out there, just so we have some extra reading material. You have some things to reference working with these producers, and you can also give them to the producers if they have any questions. So we already have the tunnel system one. I created crop rotation tech note, and then we also have common tools, which was one that Shane Jordan developed. Very straightforward. Crop rotation is going to lie very heavily on botanical crop families. So especially in specialty crop production, rotating per botanical family is going to be a very big emphasis. Not only does it have a lot of soil health benefits, but it's something that they do very strongly for pest control, disease resistance, etc. Essentially, you don't want to plant the same plant in the same place. We kind of know that with corn and soybeans, corn on corn on corn, not always great. The same type of premise for tomatoes on tomatoes on tomatoes. We just have a lot more pests when we're looking at very multi-diverse vegetable rotations. So making sure that we're moving the food source for these pests is also going to ensure that we have a little bit less pressure. So when you read the tech note, you'll find that we talk about the benefits of cover crops. And then we also go into what these families are. So very briefly, I talked about the families in each one. Typically, families follow similar flowers and reproductive structures. They're typically evolutionary related. They have similar pests and diseases. And that's kind of how this world of horticulture groups all of these together. So we have some great pictures. We have a little information about them. Please give it a read. I think it will just help in understanding what these producers are doing and what their needs are. I also talk about some example crop rotations, and then we talk about different ways crop rotation can happen when it's not just rotating a botanical family. So it may be succession planting multiple plants after one another within a season, and there's various ways to do that. We talk about companion planting, cover crops, and perennials, but through the perspective of urban ag and specialty production. So that is that one. And then our common tools is very straightforward. We have some definitions here, and then we essentially get into a long list of various tools and pictures, kind of some common knowledge about them, descriptions, what they might be best used for. So another good thing just to have on hand when you're working with these producers. Gosh, I have no idea what a dribbler is. Well, I can tell you what a dribbler is right here. So that's a great one to have too. Another resource I would like to just kind of point out is from our Specialty Producers Association. So through NRCS money, through an agreement we have with them, they have been making a lot of vegetable fact sheets. So you can find them under information and under resources. And then if you go to their resources library here, you can essentially search just about any vegetable. So let's say your producer comes to you and they say they're growing tomatoes and cucumbers in their high tunnel. To you, you know a lot about grasses and you know a lot about corn, but you have no knowledge of tomatoes. So you want to read up a little bit on tomatoes. You don't necessarily want to go Google and sort through. You can come to this document library and you can search tomato. And this is going to give all of the information on tomatoes that SPA has developed. It will also give you recordings of various webinars, conference seminars, etc. that they have on that. So here we could go to the Tomatoes Vegetable Guide and we can open up that PDF. And this is going to give you a really nice cheat sheet of growing tomatoes in South Dakota. What it looks like from start to finish, what does the nutrient management look like, varieties, pruning, harvesting, watering, different diseases. So it's a really quick 2-pager on most of the vegetables that we're working with. That's great to get you comfortable when you're working with these producers. So again, you can type just about any vegetable. They've already done their first iteration of these, which I think includes kind of the 20 most common. They're going to be doing some more as well. And then they have just a whole host of other information. So check that out. These are also located on the Urban Ag SharePoint as one big PDF. So that's also available. They are somewhere within this mix here. Oh yeah, see right here, Vegetable Fact Sheets 2024. So you have that. The last thing I will just add, because that's kind of all from me, is we did not have our urban ag training this year, just due to everything going on. So I was planning to do some type of planning to plate seminars this summer or something or other to try to get some planning out there. I do know that the summer gets very busy for us, so I don't necessarily want to do trainings just for the sake of trainings. I would really love to know what some of our field offices are wanting. So we have this beautiful Teams form. There's only 2 questions. But if you feel so strongly about suggesting some trainings, please let me know. We have what do you want / need training on, and then in what form would you prefer this training? Do you even like our planning to plate videos? If you don't, my feelings aren't hurt. You know, do we want more written guidance? Do we want a few farm tours, office hours? Let me know. I will also too say in the e-news, we have a list of different events going on hosted with South Dakota SPA, and we're going to be having quite a few farm tours come up this summer all over South Dakota. I believe there's going to be 4 or 5 of them. So if there is of interest, please look at that list. They're only day events, so we shouldn't need any type of travel authorization or overnight stuff. And if you have questions, always let me know. I'm always available. But other than that, I will turn it on back over to Jessica. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Rachel. There are no questions in the chat. Are there any verbal questions? Anybody want to raise their hand and ask any of our presenters any questions? Otherwise, I know this was a lot to absorb. We, you know, obviously do not expect you to get it all absorbed just through this format, but we do feel like it's good to verbalize and provide training on the changes that we make to the field office tech guide updates in April and October. So I think this is a good format. But if you have feedback, and I think a few of the presenters said this, these things are fluid. These are not set in stone type things. If you have heartburn with a particular practice standard or with an IR document the way it is or anything like that. We are constantly updating those things and trying to make them better for you, for the planners, not necessarily for us. Yes, we have things that we have to abide by when they come down from national headquarters, but we want to make them better for you. So please provide us feedback, whether that's through your ARC for Technology or your supervisor or through one of the state level discipline leads. So thanks so much. Have a great rest of your week and a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. Thank you.